Picture this: two men, one sheet of paper, and a moment that would split America's television screens and its conscience right down the middle. What you're about to hear isn't just another political story. It's the night when calm demolished chaos, when facts face fury, and when an entire nation watched two very different definitions of leadership collide in real time. It started in Phoenix, Arizona, under the blazing studio lights of the convention center. The air was electric with anticipation. Hundreds of people packed into chairs that stretched from the stage to the rafters, families clutching notebooks, college students with phones ready, retirees in worn denim jackets, all united by the same gnawing question that had been eating at America for months. Was their government really helping them, or had their relief money vanished into corporate boardrooms? Barack Obama sat quietly, a single sheet of paper resting in his hands. His expression was unreadable, the kind of face that gave nothing away but somehow promised everything. Across the country, in the White House residence, Donald Trump was glued to his television screen, arms folded, remote in hand, waiting for what he assumed would be just another boring political appearance. He had no idea what was coming. The town hall wasn't supposed to be explosive. It was billed as a conversation about the economy, about struggling families trying to keep their lights on after months of political promises. But everyone in that Phoenix studio could feel something different brewing in the air, something that would transform a simple Q&A into a defining moment of American politics. Mark Hanley, the seasoned journalist hosting the event, wasted no time. He leaned forward with his own stack of papers and fired the first shot. Mr. President, the White House has claimed this relief package is one of the most successful in history. Do you agree? The studio went dead silent. You could hear people breathing. Everyone knew this wasn't just a question. It was a test. How far would Obama go in critiquing the sitting president on live television? Obama didn't rush. He took a deliberate sip of water, placed his glass gently on the table, and looked directly into the camera. Then, with a voice steady as bedrock, he delivered a line that would echo across America. Well, Mark, I think the American people deserve facts, not slogans. That single sentence cut through the room like a blade. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't theatrical. It was surgical. And in that moment, the audience could sense it. Something significant was about to unfold. Obama reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded his sheet of paper. The sound of it crinkling filled the silence like thunder before a storm. He held it up casually, as if he brought along just in case, and said, "These numbers aren't mine. They come straight from the Treasury Department." The host's eyebrows shot up. People in the front rows exchanged glances. The energy in the room shifted like tectonic plates. Cameras seemed to zoom in tighter, sensing the weight of what was about to be revealed. And then Obama began to read. According to the Treasury Department, as of last week, only 38% of relief funds reached working families and small businesses. He paused, letting that number settle like dust in still air. Meanwhile, over 55% was directed to corporations, many of them already profitable. Gasps rippled through the crowd like waves. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. A man in the back shook his head, muttering under his breath. These people weren't just hearing statistics. They were hearing confirmation of suspicions they'd carried for months. But Obama wasn't finished. His voice remained steady, almost conversational, as he continued. The relief was supposed to keep small businesses open, supposed to put money in the pockets of folks struggling to make rent. But what actually happened? Too much of it ended up padding corporate accounts. That's not opinion. That's fact. The audience erupted. Some stood, clapping furiously. Others cheered loud enough to shake the rafters. The camera caught a man in a faded Phoenix Suns hat turning to his wife, saying, "He's got the receipts right there." Meanwhile, 3 time zones away in Washington, Trump's world was imploding. His advisors had urged him to skip watching, telling him it was just another TV appearance, nothing to worry about. But Trump was watching, all right, and his patience snapped like a rubber band stretched too far. He shot up from his chair, so abruptly that his glass of Diet Coke sloshed onto the carpet. "He's lying," he barked, his face crimson with rage. "He's lying right there on TV." While Obama sat composed in Phoenix, Trump was storming across the White House residence, barking orders at his scrambling staff. "Get me on the phone with somebody right now." I'm not waiting. Within minutes, the impossible happened. As Obama continued his methodical presentation in Phoenix, Trump was patched through to a live television call-in show. What followed was a contrast so stark, so visceral, that would be replayed millions of times in the days to come. On split screens across America, viewers witnessed something unprecedented. Obama, calm and collected, hands folded neatly, speaking in measured tones about facts and accountability. And Trump, his voice thundering through phone lines, frantic and defensive, words tumbling over each other like an avalanche of anger. This is fake. All fake. Trump's voice boomed through speakers while Obama sat quietly, unflinching. The so-called numbers he's waving around are not real. It's disgraceful. Obama is trying to tear down America with lies. The contrast was brutal. Here was Obama, presenting government documents with the precision of a prosecutor, while Trump sounded like he was shouting from a bunker under siege. In living rooms across the nation, people stopped what they were doing. A single mother folding laundry in Tulsa dropped a shirt mid-fold, eyes glued to the screen. A retired mechanic in his kitchen let his coffee go cold, gripping the mug tighter with each word. A grandmother in Tampa turned to her husband and whispered, "Why is he yelling if the numbers are wrong? Shouldn't he just show us the real ones?" The internet caught fire instantly. Within 10 minutes, clips of Obama reading those Treasury figures had racked up millions of views. TikTok users spliced the footage with jaw-dropping reactions. Twitter exploded with hashtags. Obama dropping truth. Receipts don't lie. Calm versus chaos. But the real story wasn't happening in cyberspace. It was happening in the hearts and minds of ordinary Americans watching the spectacle unfold. At a bar in Tucson, patrons broke into nervous laughter as Trump's voice cracked with strain. "He sounds like he's losing it," one customer muttered. Meanwhile, Obama's over there teaching a masterclass in how to deliver bad news. The split screen became the perfect metaphor that nobody could have scripted better. On one side, facts, composure, the quiet confidence of a man who had done his homework. On the other, deflection, volume, the desperate energy of someone trying to shout down reality itself. Obama leaned toward his microphone and delivered what would become the most quoted line of the night. "I don't need to respond. The report already did." The Phoenix audience roared, drowning out Trump's voice entirely. It was theater, but it was also truth, and everyone watching could feel the difference. In Washington, Trump slammed his phone down, pacing like a caged animal. His aides exchanged nervous glances while he ranted. "They're clapping for him on live TV. They're supposed to be clapping for me." But the damage was already done. The split screen had told a story more powerful than any campaign ad, more convincing than any debate performance. It wasn't about Republican versus Democrat anymore. It was about composure versus chaos, facts versus fury. By the next morning, newspapers across the country ran the split-screen image on their front pages. The caption in one national paper read, simply, "Two presidents, two realities." Coffee shops, barbershops, and break rooms became battlegrounds of conversation. In a diner outside Reno, customers argued across the counter, while waitresses refilled coffee cups. "Obama brought facts," one man insisted, stabbing his finger at the newspaper. He read straight from the government's own report. You can't fake that. But the story ran deeper than any single broadcast. In Toledo, factory workers gathered around their break room television, watching replays of the moment. One man, grease still on his hands, shook his head in amazement. "You know what gets me?" He didn't yell. He didn't wave his arms. He just read the numbers. And it hit harder than all that shouting. His co-worker nodded. That's because it wasn't about him. It was about us. That was the key. Obama had managed to make the moment bigger than himself, bigger than politics, bigger than partisan warfare. He'd made it about the American people, and they could feel it. In classrooms across the nation, teachers used the moment as a real-world civics lesson. A high school instructor in Salt Lake City played a clip for her students and asked, "What do you notice about how each man handled the pressure?" A student in the back raised his hand. One was calm, the other was mad. "And which one made you want to listen more?" "The calm one," came the instant reply. It was that simple and that profound. The polls told the story in stark numbers. Overnight surveys showed a sudden spike in public trust for Obama's version of events. In Ohio, 62% of respondents said they believed Obama's numbers over Trump's claims. In Pennsylvania, 58% said the moment changed how they viewed the administration's honesty. These weren't small shifts, they were earthquakes in political terms. But perhaps the most telling reactions came from unexpected places. At a church in El Paso, a pastor referenced a moment in his Sunday sermon. "Truth doesn't need to shout," he told his congregation. "It simply needs to be spoken clearly. When lies rage, truth whispers, and still it is heard." In Phoenix, where it all happened, people talked about the town hall for days afterward. A taxi driver told his passenger, "I was there in the audience. You could feel it, man," like he wasn't just talking politics. He was talking about us. That's what made the moment so powerful. It wasn't about scoring political points or winning news cycles. It was about respect. Obama had respected his audience enough to come prepared, to bring facts instead of spin, to treat them like adults who could handle the truth. The contrast with Trump's response couldn't have been starker. While Obama presented government documents with surgical precision, Trump's reaction was pure emotional combustion. The more he ranted, the calmer Obama's original delivery seemed in comparison. Social media amplified the contrast to devastating effect. Memes exploded overnight. Side-by-side screenshots spread across Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Obama with a caption, "Cooler than cool." Trump beside the words, "Shouting won't change the facts." By the end of the week, analysts were calling it a turning point in American political perception. One commentator on PBS summarized it perfectly. "Sometimes the truth doesn't need amplification. It just needs contrast." And in this case, the contrast couldn't have been starker. But the real impact wasn't measured in applause or memes. It was measured in the uncomfortable questions Americans started asking themselves about leadership, about honesty, about who they could actually trust when everything was on the line. A small business owner in Santa Fe, whose bakery had closed while waiting for relief money that never came, captured the sentiment perfectly in a post that went viral. "We applied for aid 3 times and never saw $1. Meanwhile, a hotel chain down the street got millions. Obama was right, and it hurt to hear confirmed. The town hall had become more than political theater. It had become a mirror held up to the nation, reflecting uncomfortable truths about who the government was really working for. Obama, true to his nature, stayed quiet after broadcast. No follow-up interviews, no victory laps, no late-night tweets. His silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. By stepping back, he allowed the moment to grow larger than himself, letting the facts carry their own weight. Meanwhile, Trump's reaction grew more frantic by the day. Night after night, he returned to the town hall in rallies and interviews, calling Obama a liar, a fraud, even demanding investigations. But each outburst only reinforced the original contrast. The more he shouted, the calmer Obama's delivery seemed in hindsight. The American people were learning a lesson that transcended politics. Facts don't bend to anger. Truth doesn't need volume to be heard. And sometimes the loudest person in the room is also the least honest. In Denver, a cafe owner whose business had struggled through the crisis was interviewed outside her closed shop. "I lost everything waiting for that relief money that never came. When I saw Obama hold up those numbers, I felt like someone finally saw us, not as statistics, but as people." Her words made the evening news, amplifying the sense that this wasn't just about 2 men fighting for headlines. It was about millions of Americans who felt forgotten, ignored, misled by the very people sworn to help them. The week that followed felt less like politics and more like a national reckoning. Every news outlet ran analysis pieces. Every podcast dissected the exchange. Every talk radio host tried to frame the moment in their own terms. But beneath all the noise, ordinary people were processing something simpler and more profound. They had witnessed a difference between leadership that respects intelligence and leadership that insults it. A retired Army sergeant, speaking to young veterans at a community center in Boise, put it in military terms. "When you're in command, you don't scream at your men to follow you. You show them the way." That's the difference we saw on TV. One man showed, the other screamed. Churches incorporated the moment into sermons about honesty. Teachers used it as a real-world example of character under pressure. Parents explained to their children that real strength doesn't need to announce itself with volume. The polls continued their dramatic shift. Florida independents trusted Obama over Trump by nearly 60%. Michigan saw trust in the administration's economic messaging drop by double digits. Even pro-Trump outlets struggled to dismiss numbers that stark. But perhaps the most powerful reaction came from those who had lived through the relief program's failures firsthand. Small business owners shared their stories online, confirming what Obama had revealed. A mechanic in Fresno wrote, 13 months I waited for help that never came. Then I watched a billion-dollar company down the street get approved in 3 weeks. Obama didn't just read numbers. He read our lives. The moment had transcended partisan politics entirely. It had become about something more fundamental. The relationship between citizen and government, between promise and delivery, between those who lead and those who follow. In the control rooms of news networks, producers recognized they had witnessed something rare, a moment when political theater gave way to genuine revelation. The footage would be studied in journalism schools, analyzed in political science courses, and remembered as the night when preparation met improvisation and won decisively. Obama's strategy had been brilliant in its simplicity. He hadn't come to Phoenix to attack or grandstand. He'd come to teach. Like the professor he'd once been, he brought his homework, laid out the facts, and let his audience draw their own conclusions. The Treasury Department report he'd quoted became the most downloaded government document in months. Citizens who had never read federal paperwork in their lives were suddenly poring over budget allocations and fund distributions, fact-checking claims they'd been fed for months. Trump's team worked desperately to contain the damage, drafting counter-arguments and scheduling friendly interviews. But every attempt to discredit Obama's numbers only drew more attention to them. The harder they pushed back, the more credible the original claims appeared. In gas stations and grocery stores, Americans were having conversations they'd never had before. Not about party affiliation or political ideology, but about basic competence and honesty. A waitress in Albuquerque summed it up perfectly. We don't need someone to scream at us. We need someone to tell us the truth, even if it stings. The ripple effect spread far beyond politics. Late-night comedians, though quick with jokes about Trump's meltdown, kept circling back to a serious point. Shouting doesn't equal strength. Business schools began using the contrast as a case study in crisis communication. Corporate executives took note of how Obama's measured response had been far more devastating than any aggressive attack could have been. The moment had revealed something profound about American political communication. In an era of constant noise, constant outrage, constant performance, Obama had demonstrated the power of quiet authority. He'd shown that facts, presented clearly and calmly, could cut through chaos more effectively than any amount of volume or bluster. Social media became a laboratory for this lesson. Videos comparing the two responses went viral not just for their entertainment value, but for their educational impact. Comment sections filled with observations about tone, about credibility, about the difference between confidence and desperation. A high school teacher in Sacramento told her civics class, "Watch how each man responds to challenge. Notice who stays calm and who gets defensive. Those reactions tell you everything you need to know about character under pressure." But the story didn't end with the broadcast. In the days that followed, investigative journalists began digging deeper into the Treasury report Obama had cited. What they found confirmed every number he'd read, every claim he'd made. The relief program that had been touted as a historic success had indeed funneled the majority of its funds to large corporations, while leaving small businesses and families with scraps. Independent fact-checkers, initially skeptical of Obama's dramatic claims, published verification after verification. The numbers weren't just accurate, they were conservative. The actual disparities were even worse than what Obama had revealed. This confirmation transformed the town hall from a political moment into a historical one. Obama hadn't just criticized policy. He'd exposed a fundamental breach of trust between government and citizen. In corporate boardrooms across America, executives who had quietly benefited from the relief program suddenly found themselves uncomfortable. Some companies voluntarily returned portions of their funding, sensing which way the wind was blowing. Others hired crisis management firms, preparing for public relations disasters that seemed increasingly inevitable. The human cost of the revelations became impossible to ignore. Local news stations across the country began featuring stories of small business owners who had lost everything while waiting for help that never came. A bakery in Portland that had closed its doors after 40 years in business. A family restaurant in Kansas that had to lay off 3 generations of workers. An auto repair shop in Tennessee that had been forced to sell its equipment to pay rent. These weren't abstract policy failures anymore. They were faces, names, families whose dreams had been deferred while corporate shareholders collected windfalls. Obama's decision to remain silent after the town hall proved to be masterstroke. By refusing to gloat or pile on, he allowed the moment to speak for itself. His restraint made the contrast with Trump's continued outbursts even sharper. Every Trump rally that week included angry references to the disgraceful lies Obama had told. Every phone interview featured defensive rants about fake numbers and jealous predecessors. But the more Trump protested, the more credible Obama's calm presentation appeared in retrospect. Political strategists from both parties recognized they had witnessed something unusual, a moment when style and substance had aligned perfectly to create maximum impact. Republican consultants privately admitted the optics had been devastating. It's not that people love Obama. One said off the record, it's that he made Trump look out of control, and voters hate chaos. Democratic strategists, meanwhile, treaded carefully, wary of appearing to gloat. They understood that the moment belonged to Obama individually, not to any party apparatus. His effectiveness had come from his ability to transcend partisan politics and speak directly to American frustration. The international reaction was equally telling. Foreign news outlets ran the split-screen footage with headlines like America's Tale of Two Leaders and When Calm Meets Storm. Diplomatic observers noted how the contrast had implications far beyond domestic politics. It was a window into American leadership at a critical moment. But perhaps the most significant impact was the quietest one, the way ordinary Americans began evaluating leadership differently. In workplaces and schools, people started paying attention to who stayed calm under pressure and who got defensive when challenged. A retired firefighter in Minneapolis told his grandson, "When you're telling the truth, you don't have to scream. People can feel it." A single mother in Fresno explained to her kids at dinner, "Pay attention to who stays calm when things get tough. That's the person you can count on." These weren't political lessons. They were life lessons, taught through the stark contrast of that Phoenix night. As the weeks passed, the town hall's impact only grew. College courses in communication and leadership began featuring the footage as a case study. Business schools used it to teach crisis management. Even military academies incorporated it into leadership training, demonstrating how composure under fire could be more powerful than any aggressive response. The Treasury report Obama had quoted became required reading in economics courses across the country. Students who analyzed the data confirmed what he had revealed. The relief program had indeed favored large corporations over the small businesses and families it was supposed to help. But beyond the academic analysis, the town hall had accomplished something more important. It had reminded Americans that they deserved better than spin, better than slogans, better than leaders who treated them like children who couldn't handle the truth. The moment in Phoenix hadn't just been about exposing financial misconduct. It had been about restoring dignity to political discourse, showing that serious problems required serious solutions, not theatrical performances. Obama's approach had been revolutionary in its simplicity. Bring facts, speak clearly, trust the audience to understand the implications. No gimmicks, no gotcha moments, no personal attacks. Just a quiet power of truth presented with respect for the people who deserve to hear it. The contrast with Trump's response had been equally instructive. The defensive anger, the personal attacks, the immediate pivot to conspiracy theories. All of it had revealed a leader more concerned with protecting his image than addressing the problems his policies had created. Americans had learned something that night that would stick with them long after the headlines faded. When the stakes are high and the truth is uncomfortable, character reveals itself. Some people stay calm and face facts. Others get loud and attack messengers. The town hall had been scheduled as a simple discussion about economic policy. Instead, It had become a master class in leadership, a lesson in the power of preparation over improvisation, and a reminder that in democracy's most crucial moments, citizens can tell the difference between substance and performance. Years from now, when political historians write about this era, they'll point to Phoenix as a turning point, not because of what was said, but because of how it was said. They'll note that in an age of constant noise and manufactured outrage, quiet authority proved more powerful than loud desperation. But the real winners that night weren't Obama or Trump. They were the American people who witnessed firsthand what leadership could look like when it was grounded in facts rather than fiction, in respect rather than contempt, in calm rather than chaos. The lesson from Phoenix echoes still. Truth doesn't need a shout. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it clearly. And when that happens, when facts meet fury and composure confronts chaos, the contrast tells us everything we need to know about the choice between leadership and performance, between serving the people and serving oneself. In the end, that single sheet of paper, those Treasury Department numbers, and that split screen had accomplished what years of political debate could not. They had shown America exactly what they were choosing between. Not just policies or personalities, but fundamentally different approaches to power, to truth, and to the sacred trust between leaders and the led. The Phoenix confrontation proved that in America's most defining moments, character doesn't just matter, it's everything. And when character is tested under the brightest lights and the highest pressure, the difference between authentic leadership and desperate performance becomes impossible to hide. That's the story of the night when truth met fury, when calm demolished chaos, and when a single sheet of paper reminded an entire nation what leadership could look like when it's done right. The moment when America saw exactly who its leaders really were, not in their promises, but in their reactions when those promises were tested against reality. And perhaps most importantly, it was the night when millions of Americans remembered that they deserved leaders who respected them enough to tell them the truth, even when that truth was hard to hear. Because real leadership isn't about making people feel good with comfortable lies. It's about trusting them with uncomfortable truths. That's the lesson from Phoenix, a lesson that echoes far beyond politics into every corner of American life, where truth matters more than theater, where facts matter more than fury, and where the quiet voice of authority will always triumph over the desperate shouts of those who have lost their way.